Hello everyone.
At 81 years old, Colonel Arthur Morgan moved like a shadow of his former self, slow, deliberate, yet unmistakably proud. On a brisk Wednesday morning, he made his way to the downtown Veterans Affairs office, his step stiff with age, but guided by purpose. He wore a deep navy suit that had once been his Sunday best, now faded with time and worn thin at the elbows. The brass buttons still shone, though each polished by hand, just like the shoes he had buffed that morning out of long-held habit. Pinned carefully to his chest were medals earned in sweat, blood, and sand. The Bronze Star, the Silver Star, the Purple Heart, each one a fragment of a life most had forgotten but which Arthur remembered vividly. The campaigns in Iraq during the early 80s, the endless desert nights, the friends who never made it back. He wasn't there for charity. He wasn't begging. He'd come seeking clarity, a resolution to a pension that had mysteriously stopped 3 months ago. Calls had led him in circles. Letters had gone unanswered. His patience, honed over decades of command and sacrifice, had not frayed. But he was tired. Inside the office, the air was stale with bureaucracy. A young clerk named Tyler sat behind the counter, scrolling on his phone, barely glancing up as Arthur approached. "I need help with a pension issue," Arthur said politely, offering a worn manila folder. Tyler rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed. He glanced at the medals, then said, just loudly enough for the room to hear, "Still breathing? Thought relics like you were all museum pieces by now." A few snickers floated from nearby desks. No one intervened. No supervisor stepped in. Arthur paused. He said nothing. Instead, he carefully placed the folder on the counter, adjusted his coat, and turned away, dignity intact. Outside, the wind bit through his thin coat as he sat down on a metal bench. From his breast pocket, he drew a small black and white photo, frayed at the edges. 8 soldiers, his unit in Iraq 1984, had died in service. He touched each face with his thumb, eyes heavy with a loss that the world no longer seemed to notice. He wasn't angry. He was simply forgotten. And that was a different kind of wound, one that medals couldn't mend. Tyler was still smirking behind the counter, twirling a pen between his fingers like he had just won something. "Can you believe that guy?" he said, nodding toward the door Colonel Morgan had exited. "Relics like that think the world still owes them." His coworker didn't reply, but didn't protest either. "Bet those medals came with the jacket," Tyler added. "Probably bought 'em off eBay." In a quiet corner of the room, Helena Patel sat stiffly, her purse clutched tight in her lap. She had heard every word. She remembered that name, Colonel Arthur Morgan. Her late husband, Samir, had served under him in Iraq. The photograph still sat on her mantel at home. 8 men in tan uniforms, arms around each other, dust and pride on their faces. For never came home. Samir used to say, "If not for Morgan, I'd be one of them." She had never met the colonel in person. Until today. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her phone. The number she dialed had not been used in years, her husband's old contact, one she had kept more out of respect than purpose. She typed a single message, "Colonel Morgan, disrespected, VA office." Then she closed the phone and waited. Exactly 31 minutes later, the stillness outside the building cracked open. 3 black SUVs pulled up to the curb with crisp finality. Doors opened. Boots hit pavement. Inside, conversations froze. Chairs squeaked. Pen dropped. People turned toward the glass doors in quiet confusion. The man who entered wore a service uniform with 4 stars gleaming on his shoulders. General Isaac Chambers. His walk was steady, his jaw firm, his voice like steel striking steel. "Who insulted Colonel Arthur Morgan?" Silence. Eyes darted. Tyler sat straighter, paler now. I didn't mean anything by it," he said. General Chambers didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I served under that man. In Fallujah, 1984. When mortar fire tore through our camp, he carried 6 wounded men to safety. When I lay bleeding, he shielded me from debris with his own body. He saved my life." He turned, gesturing to the door. Now he stands outside, humiliated in the country he served. No one spoke. 2 soldiers walked in and held the door open. Colonel Morgan entered again, flanked gently, his coat still buttoned, his medals still dim from time but bright with meaning. He looked confused. "I didn't ask for." "You didn't have to," Chambers said, stepping aside. "We remember." Tyler lowered his eyes. The room watched, and for the first time in hours, Colonel Morgan was not invisible. General Chambers stood tall in the middle of the VA office, his voice low but commanding. That man out there didn't ask for recognition. He didn't come for attention. He came because his pension, his dignity, was denied. He turned slowly to face the full staff, his gaze heavy with memory. "You know who he is to me?" Chambers said. "He's the man who pulled me out of a burning convoy in Fallujah. While mortars fell around us, while bullets flew, he carried me, wounded, bleeding, to the medevac. I begged him to leave me. He wouldn't." Silence. He said, "Nobody gets left behind." He was true to his word. "We all got out because of him." He paused, letting the weight of that truth settle in the air. 2 soldiers stepped forward, holding a leather binder. General Chambers opened it. "This is a list of pension claims. Denied, forgotten, closed without proper review. This isn't a mistake. It's neglect." He looked back toward the door. "And that man was made to feel worthless here." At that, the doors opened once more. Colonel Morgan entered, still confused, still reluctant. He looked smaller than he had an hour ago, but his back was straight and his steps deliberate. Chambers turned to face him. "Colonel Arthur Morgan," he said with reverence, "I cannot undo what happened, but I can make this right." He turned to the gathered staff. "Effective immediately, we will reopen every veteran pension case denied in the last 5 years. Every appeal, every misfiled report. We will fix what should never have been broken." Gasps rippled through the room. No one spoke, but everyone listened. Outside, word was spreading. Footage had already begun to circulate, of the SUVs arriving, of the colonel returning, of the general's voice rising with quiet power. Social media caught fire. #HonorMorgan began trending. Veterans shared stories of their own denials, of sleeping in cars, of being told their documents were lost, of silence. The press arrived. Camera crews, microphones, reporters. But Morgan gave no interviews. He didn't seek headlines. He returned home to a quiet apartment. He fed his cat. He drank coffee from the chipped cup he'd kept since Baghdad. He stared at the old photo of his unit, 8 men smiling. For we're gone. That night, he received 37 letters. Handwritten. Some from strangers. Some from widows. One from a boy who said, "My dad said you saved him. Thank you." Morgan didn't respond. He didn't need to. The world was responding for him. The next morning, Colonel Morgan returned to the VA office, not because anyone had asked him to, but because he believed in finishing what he started. The same coat hung on his shoulders. The same medals adorned his chest. But something was different. This time, the lobby fell silent when he entered. Tyler looked up from his desk, then quickly away. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't speaking. A new clerk approached the colonel gently and said, "We're ready for you, sir." Inside, a team had been assigned to his case. Within minutes, his pension was not only reinstated, it was paid retroactively for all missed months, along with a formal letter of apology. When he left, the director of the office stood to shake his hand. But outside, something else was waiting. Lining the sidewalk were men and women in uniform, active duty and retired, spanning generations. Some in crisp dress blues, others in worn fatigues. Many held their hands to their brows in a solemn salute as the colonel passed. A quiet honor guard, assembled not by orders, but respect. At the very end of the line stood Helena Patel, a small bundle of flowers in her arms. "My husband served under you," she said softly. "Samir. He always said you never left anyone behind." Morgan's eyes filled with recognition and something more tender. "Samir Patel," he repeated. "He saved more lives than I ever did." even mine. Then, from the crowd, stepped General Chambers, now dressed in civilian clothes. Colonel, I have orders to place a permanent flag on your file, priority status, full benefits. You won't stand in another line again. Morgan nodded. Thank you, he said, voice quiet but steady. Then came the unexpected turn. Inside the building, Tyler stood with a box in his hands, his belongings. But Morgan raised a hand. No, he said. The director looked confused. Sir. He shouldn't be fired, Morgan said. Punishment doesn't teach. Responsibility does. The room fell quiet again. Morgan turned to Tyler. You will learn who we are. You'll listen. Not because you're forced, but because you should have long ago. Tyler looked stunned. Yes, sir, he whispered. He wasn't sent home. He was reassigned to veteran outreach. He would meet the people he'd once dismissed, and he would remember their names. Weeks passed. Tyler, now quieter, began showing up early. He sat with veterans, listened to their stories, filled forms carefully, respectfully. At first, they were cautious. Then they began to speak. One morning, Tyler asked a Marine, "What was the hardest part?" The Marine pointed to a photo of a fallen comrade. Coming home without him. Tyler didn't speak after that. He just nodded. He was learning. 3 months later, Tyler arrived at a small home with a holiday package in hand. Inside were socks, books, and a handwritten card. He handed it to Colonel Morgan without fanfare. I was wrong about everything, Tyler said. Morgan nodded once. That was enough. On Veterans Day, the city invited Morgan to raise the flag in the central plaza. As it reached the top, for jets roared overhead in missing man formation. Morgan stood still, hand over heart, a single tear tracking down his weathered cheek. Not for himself, but for the men in the photo tucked inside his coat pocket. Outside the VA office, a plaque had been placed beside the door. He never asked to be honored, so we honored him anyway. Over 3,000 claims were reviewed and corrected. A change began not from policy but from memory. And now, when Colonel Morgan enters any office, people stand. Not because they must, but because they remember.
Bye.